The lights above the long mahogany table shimmered like soft amber halos, catching on the rim of my champagne glass. The scent of truffle butter and roasted salmon hung in the air, the kind of detail that made everything feel expensive, controlled, perfect. It was my promotion dinner, the moment I'd worked nearly a decade for. The entire marketing board sat around me, smiling, congratulating, pretending they weren't surprised a woman like me had made it this far. I smiled back, perfectly poised in my navy silk blouse, fingers steady against the stem of my glass, until a sound cut through the laughter. A sharp gasp, a chair scraping the floor. Then my brother, Ethan, clutching his stomach, collapsing beside the table. Everything froze. The room filled with startled murmurs. I remember the manager shouting for help, someone dialing 911, and me sitting there for one endless second, unable to move. My heart hammered, but my face stayed calm. That was how I'd survived for years. Calm, composed, unbreakable. But seeing him like that, pale, trembling, tears streaking his face, cracked something deep inside me. Because I knew this wasn't just random pain. I'd seen it before. I'd worn them before. And yet, somehow, it had taken my biggest night for the truth to finally collapse in front of everyone. When the paramedics carried Ethan out, I stood and whispered to my assistant, "Cancel the speeches." Then I pulled my phone from my clutch, the one holding a video I'd kept hidden for months. The proof no one wanted to see. I was 24 when Ethan's pain first began. Back then, he was 19, tall, sarcastic, with that quiet kind of brilliance that made teachers adore him and our parents roll their eyes. They called him dramatic. Said his episodes were excuses to skip class or dodge responsibility. But I knew better. I still remember that night, the flickering kitchen light, the smell of burnt coffee, Ethan sitting hunched over the table, pressing his palms against his lower abdomen, sweat glistening at his hairline. He whispered, "Liv, it hurts all the time." I reached for his hand, and he flinched. Our mother walked in, her tone clipped and cold. "Ethan, stop performing. We've spent enough on doctors." My father didn't even look up from his laptop. "He'll grow out of it," he said, as if pain was a phase. I argued, begged, even took Ethan to an urgent care clinic myself. But when the bills came in, it turned into a war. "Olivia," Mom snapped, "if you can pay for your brother's imaginary illnesses, then maybe you should start paying rent too." That night, Ethan tried to apologize for being a burden. I remember grabbing his shoulders and saying, "Don't you ever say that again. You're not crazy, and you're not a burden." He smiled weakly and said, "Then why does it feel like I am?" A few weeks later, I got an offer, an internship in Chicago. It was my chance out. My shot at everything I'd been fighting for. Before I left, our grandmother, the only one who ever believed in us, pressed her old silver locket into my hand. Inside was a tiny photo of her and a note folded small enough to fit behind it. "Truth heals slower than lies destroy. But it heals." I wore it under every blouse, every blazer, every boardroom victory that came after. But sometimes, when I caught my reflection late at night, the woman in the glass looked too composed to cry, too successful to feel guilty, I still heard Ethan's voice. The one that asked why it hurt to exist. And I knew no matter how far I ran, I hadn't really escaped anything. I'd just learned to carry it in heels. Chicago was a storm, cold winds, late trains, and a kind of loneliness that echoed even in crowded coffee shops. But for me, it was freedom. For the first time, no one told me to quiet down, to smile more, or to stop dreaming too big. I started as a junior marketing analyst at a mid-tier firm. Back then, my apartment was barely bigger than a walk-in closet. I'd sit on the floor, eating noodles from a paper cup, while my laptop glowed with spreadsheets and campaign drafts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. My mentor, Diana Rhodes, was the first person who truly saw me. She was in her 50s, sharp as glass, with a voice that could silence a conference room. One night, after a brutal presentation, she stayed behind while everyone else packed up. "You've got the instincts," she said, "but you hold back. Who are you still trying to prove wrong?" I couldn't answer. She smiled knowingly. Then start proving yourself right. Those words became my armor. I worked harder than I ever thought possible, pitching late, rewriting campaigns at 3 a.m., fighting for clients no one wanted. When I wasn't working, I was researching Ethan's symptoms, scrolling through forums, emailing specialists I couldn't afford. Every unread message felt like a small betrayal. He texted sometimes, "Doing okay, Liv," or "Mom says I should get a job soon." I'd type out long replies, full of worry and love, but usually deleted them. Because every time I reached out, I ended up feeling helpless again. Years passed. Promotions came. So did money. Enough to pay off debts, enough to move into a glass-walled apartment that overlooked the river. To everyone else, I was success in heels. But I kept my life quiet online, no photos of my home, no titles, no press mentions. My parents still thought I worked in an office somewhere. I told myself it was easier that way, that privacy was peace. But deep down, I knew it was fear. Fear of hearing my mother's voice say, "You think you're better than us now?" Then, one winter night, I saw Ethan's name light up my phone after months of silence. His voice trembled. "Liv, I think something's really wrong this time." I promised I'd fly home that weekend. But the next morning, I got called into a meeting, the one that would decide my biggest promotion yet. And I told him, "Just hold on a few more days, okay?" He said, "Sure, Liv. You always do." I didn't realize how much those words would haunt me, or how close we already were to the breaking point. Because the truth was, Ethan had been living with pain our parents refused to see, and I'd been living with guilt I refused to feel. And eventually, both of us would collapse under it. The sirens outside the restaurant wailed like a memory I'd been running from for years. I followed the ambulance in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The city lights blurred past, streaks of gold and red, and for the first time in years, I felt like the terrified girl who'd once begged people to believe her brother's pain. When I reached the hospital, my parents were already there. Mom's eyes darted up when she saw me. "You had to make a scene, didn't you? At your big fancy dinner?" Her voice was sharp, defensive, like guilt wearing perfume. I didn't respond. I just looked through the glass at Ethan, unconscious, for in his arm, his face so pale, it almost blended with the sheets. Dad spoke next. "You know what stress does to him, Olivia. You couldn't have picked a quieter way to celebrate." That's when something in me broke. Not loudly, but cleanly, like glass under heat. I turned toward them, my tone calm but cold. "You still think this is stress?" Mom folded her arms. "Doctors have said." "No." I cut her off. "You said." "For years." Their silence was confirmation enough. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from fury. "I wasn't going to show this," I said. "But I'm done protecting people who never protected him." I opened the gallery and tapped on the video. The sound filled the sterile waiting room. Ethan's voice, weak and strained, recorded months earlier on a hospital bed. He'd sent it to me after one of his worst flare-ups. "Mom, Dad, please," his voice trembled. "I can't keep pretending it's fine. It's not just in my head. Please believe me." Then another voice, my mother's, cold, dismissive. "Ethan, stop dramatizing everything. You're embarrassing us." The video ended with a faint sob and the sound of footsteps leaving the room. When it stopped, the only sound left was the soft hum of the vending machine nearby. My father looked stunned. My mother turned pale. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I locked my phone, slipped it back into my purse, and said, "That was 6 months ago. He sent that to me the same night I called you both, and you told me to stay out of family matters." They both looked away, shame washing over them like a slow, visible wave. For years, I'd wanted them to just admit they were wrong, to say sorry. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need their words anymore. The nurse stepped out then, giving us the update. "He's stable but exhausted. It's been building for a while." I thanked her quietly. When I looked back at my parents, they were still frozen, processing the truth they'd spent years denying. "You built your comfort on his silence," I said softly. And I built my success on running away from it. We all failed him. My mother began to cry, silent, tight tears that looked like they'd been waiting years to fall. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. But I didn't feel victory. Just a strange calm, the kind that comes after a storm finally breaks. That night, as Ethan slept, I sat by his bedside. The glow from the monitors painted his face in soft green light. I reached for his hand and whispered, "I kept the proof, Ethan. I kept it for this moment, so they'd finally see." And for the first time in years, I felt something inside me unclench. Because maybe, just maybe, truth had finally done what lies never could, heal. The next morning, sunlight bled through the hospital blinds, thin and quiet. Ethan was awake, pale, but smiling faintly. "Guess I ruined your big night," he joked weakly. I squeezed his hand. "You didn't ruin anything. You just revealed it." He blinked, confused, but didn't press. When Mom and Dad entered, the room grew smaller. They looked like ghosts, people who'd walked out of the wreckage of their own denial. Mom's eyes were swollen, makeup smudged. Dad carried a paper cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "I called a specialist," I said before they could speak. "The one in Boston." He reviewed Ethan's file. "It's chronic neural pain. Real. Serious. And treatable if we start now." Mom nodded slowly, voice trembling. We didn't know." I met her eyes. "You didn't want to know." Silence. Heavy. Necessary. For years, I dreamed of this moment, of them finally realizing the damage their blindness caused. But standing there, with Ethan hooked to IVs and monitors, I realized vengeance wouldn't heal any of us. So I set the terms, not to punish but to rebuild. "Here's how this works," I said quietly but firmly. "Ethan's treatment comes first. I'll cover the cost, but you're both going to therapy, family therapy, and not the kind you fake your way through. You show up. Every week." Dad looked up, startled. "Olivia." "No," I interrupted. "I've spent too many years letting your excuses guide this family. That ends now." I turned to my mother. "You're going to stop pretending strength means silence. You're going to see him this time, even when it's ugly, even when it's hard." Her lip quivered, but she nodded. Then I faced Ethan, my voice softening. "And you stop apologizing for existing. You stop carrying everyone's guilt like it's your fault. Deal?" He gave a weak laugh. "Deal." The nurse came in to check his vitals, giving us a moment to breathe. I leaned back, exhaling slowly, realizing the strange calm that followed confrontation. Power used to feel like control, like having the last word in a meeting or signing a new client. But in that sterile hospital room, power felt like peace. It felt like telling the truth without shaking. Before leaving, my father hesitated at the door. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I don't know how to make this right." I looked at him, the man who dismissed so much, who'd hidden behind rationality while others bled emotionally. "Start by being honest," I said. "Not with me, with yourself." He nodded once, almost as if afraid to break the silence that followed. That day, I didn't feel like a daughter or a businesswoman. I felt like someone who had finally rewritten the script. And as I walked out into the hallway, heels clicking softly against the tile, I thought of Grandma's words in that old silver locket. "Truth heals slower than lies destroy. But it heals." And for the first time, I believed her. 3 months later, spring returned to Chicago. The air was soft again, less of a storm, more of a beginning. Ethan was in Boston, finally getting treatment. I'd visited him twice already, and each time he looked a little stronger. His texts no longer read like cries for help, just updates about his new roommate or the therapy dog he'd fallen in love with. Mom and Dad had started attending therapy, too. At first, I didn't believe they would. But then Mom sent me a photo, the two of them sitting awkwardly on a beige couch, holding paper cups of coffee and smiling like people learning how to be human again. And me? I kept working, but differently now. Slower. Softer. I started mentoring new women in my company, just like Diana once mentored me. I stopped hiding my title, stopped minimizing my worth to make others comfortable. One evening, I stood by my apartment window, city lights glimmering below. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Ethan, they said I'm improving. Slowly, but for real this time. Me, I never doubted it. Ethan, thanks for fighting for me, Liv. Even when I didn't ask. I smiled through quiet tears. That was the thing about healing. It never came in fireworks. It came in small, quiet sentences like that. I unclasped the silver locket from my neck and opened it again. The note inside was fragile now, edges worn from years of hiding against my heart. Truth heals slower than lies destroy. But it heals. I whispered, "You were right, Grandma. It just needed time." My reflection in the window looked different, still strong, but softer around the edges. A woman who'd stopped running from her past and learned to walk beside it. I thought back to that night at my promotion dinner, the one that should have been about titles and applause. Instead, it became the night everything real began. Because truth, once spoken, doesn't collapse. It stands. Even when everything else falls apart. So when people now ask me about that night, why the celebration ended in silence, I tell them the truth. That was the night I earned 2 promotions. One at work and one in life. And every time I say it, I feel the same quiet peace that filled that hospital hallway, the peace of finally choosing what's right, not what's easy.